Welcome inside Under the Microscope video edition. John Ledyard along with Brandon Thorn. We're here to talk about offensive line, defensive line play, but we're not focusing on just one team this week. We got a couple plays with the Bears because we like some of the things they did, but then we've kind of just got a mashup, right, Brandon? Different blocks you saw, different things you saw through the week, and we'll kind of break them down one by one. It's a little bit of a longer video period, but some of the analysis might be a little more quick-hitting depending on what we're focusing on, but kind of a mashup of all kinds of different blocks this week, huh, Brandon?
Yeah, I figured I'd kind of combine my usual scouting notebook with our film room and just kind of test it out, play around with it, see what people think, just including, just random things that stood out to me with the primary focus on the Bears' performance against the Vikings. But, it's just a nice mixture of just, some subtle technique and then just some big plays by offensive linemen throughout the week just to get them a little more recognition, just than they otherwise get.
Right. So first thing, we got Bears and 12 personnel running outside zone, and you can see right away we've talked about it with 12 personnel. You got a lot of gaps to cover when everybody's in line like this. So now as defensively you're spread out a little bit, and you've kind of got each guy to a gap, and if a guy can't handle his gap, and if he doesn't get help from somewhere else on a given play, then it could end up resulting in a big gain. And here we see kind of a combination of things. If you look on the right side here, Everson Griffin playing that right defensive end spot. He spikes inside, and I think he and Eric Kendricks are running a little bit of a gap exchange. He kind of spikes inside. Kendricks flows outside. Kendricks probably doesn't recognize the flow of the ball quickly enough to help out. Anthony Barr can't get off a block. And Harrison Smith, who's the extra defender who comes into the box to defend the 12 personnel, he's a little bit off screen just outside of Anthony Barr's right hip over here. He doesn't slice through when no one blocks him. He doesn't slice through and recognize quickly enough to make the tackle either. He may miss it. It's hard to tell from this angle. But the Vikings didn't tackle well all night, and they didn't react well all night. And the Bears did block pretty well, but I think you'll agree with me. When we looked at the tape, the Vikings beat themselves a pretty good bit too in this game.
Yeah, I think they did. But, the Bears' offensive line performance was admirable, especially considering their two Pro Bowl guards didn't play. Josh Sitton and Kyle Long both were out this game. So having two backups in at guard, surrounding a rookie center, with Charles Leno and Bobby Massey. I mean, it's a very, very admirable performance considering that as well.
Sure.
Just that they were able to do what they did.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, this right here is, I think, a 68-yard gain from Jordan Howard. It's like the third or fourth play of the game. But you'll see here is kind of a perfect set of circumstances that resulted in this play. A lot of things went wrong with Minnesota, and Chicago just kind of did enough to spring Howard here.
You can see Everson Griffin right off the snap kind of spikes inside, and Kendricks flows outside, and that against outside zone is just tough. You kind of get caught a little bit. Right. Kendricks is in a tough spot, I think, but I don't think he does himself any favors by not really recognizing where the ball's going either. It seems like he kind of thinks that Howard's bouncing it when Howard decides to bang it up in. And, his eye level looks good there, but you can see there he kind of loses track of the ball. And Harrison Smith's unblocked. He really needs to probably fly in there and be watching the back at that point. He's the force defender, though, so it's obviously not his primary responsibility, so it's tough to ask a lot of him, I guess. But that's a tackle he usually makes there, and Anthony Barr probably, if he gets off that block, because his job, he's kind of coming inside there because Smith is the force defender. So,
right, like you mentioned, the key here is they catch him in a little slant here up front. With Kendricks looping around the slanting Griffin, and that just kind of gets him out of position. And then Cody Whitehair does a nice job here of just kind of screening off his man and creating a little alley. That's kind of a notable thing here. He just really good, subtle, quick movement out to the second level, good angles, and just walls this guy off.
Right.
And that's kind of the block that
the key
sprung it.
Right. Kendricks even has leverage to the right side here. At first his head's on the opposite side. Then he just can't really disengage, or I can't tell if he can't find it. It's hard to see what he's seeing there. And then, of course, you need your safety to fill the alley in that situation if you run it back a little bit.
Yeah, 27.
Jaron Kearse just totally. And he actually got benched. I don't know if he returned or not, but he got benched right after this play. I mean, it's just a terrible angle. It's it was his thing in college, just not a lot of interest in run defense and didn't take good angles, wasn't very physical, and so that kind of just fits in with his profile. But yeah, I mean, it's good blocking up front. There's no question. And some things Minnesota probably did to get themselves a little bit out of position too, and not react quickly enough to what they were seeing on an outside zone run.
Yeah, I mean, this game, considering the context, so it's kind of a segue into this play. The reason I picked this play was only like a 3 or 4 yard gain, but Cody Whitehair just kind of encapsulates who he is on this play just with his technique. It's very subtle, but he just does a nice job. At the very end, he probably could have done a little better here, but he is going against Linval Joseph. I mean, to go against him all night with two backups alongside of you as a rookie, and you're switching positions, that whole thing. I mean, it was a really admirable performance from Whitehair, especially given all that context and those circumstances going against an elite nose tackle. But yeah, this is a really nice job from him and the backup guard here, Cush. This is his name. Oh, sorry, it's a little choppy sometimes. Yeah, I mean, Joseph is driven back, was that 4 yards, 3 yards? Yeah. I mean, he gets airborne for a second on that double team. But Whitehair just does a really nice job with his footwork out of his stance right here to just kind of use that inside arm to walk him back, and then while he's moving on to his next responsibility, which is the linebacker does his job for him right there.
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah. I mean,
it's just a nice job.
What's Anthony Barr seeing there? The running back never went.
That tight end probably.
He thinks he sees it on the split zone, and he's trying to follow that tight end.
Yeah, it looked like he was reading the tight end for sure.
So he's trying to maybe cheat it a little bit,
Yeah.
It's a little bit funny because, he's probably reading that motion, but at the same time, the running back's coming right at him and he moves out of the way. And so, I mean, I know you have to, defend split zone and recognize the fact that there's multiple reads, but for him, in terms of patrolling his gap, you got to probably trust your outside guys to get their job done there too. Because, like you said, he really does Whitehair's job for him. I mean, the motion kind of pulls him straight out of the way.
But Whitehair was in position to block him. And just does a nice job on Linval Joseph there.
Right. Harrison Smith did a nice job, too, fighting through a block a little bit there. I think it was tight end maybe, or wide the crack.
Yep.
I can't see who that is with the crack, but yeah, fights it off and keeps his leverage.
Yeah, so this is those are both in the first quarter. I'm going to go the second half now, and Chicago has a pretty comfortable lead right now. They're going to run a little toss here, but out here on the left, you can't see it. They're basically in a tight formation, so how the receivers are lined up over here on the right, that's basically how they are on the left, except one of them is a tight end. And those guys block down, and then that allows the left tackle to pull. And there's just a lot of nice blocking on this play. And this is a pretty critical third down. Yeah, I mean, look at number 64. I mean, this guy, it's funny because I was just talking to somebody last week or the week before about this guy who played for Sitten. I think it was last week. His last name's Cush. He's kind of a journeyman guy. He's been all over the league. But this is a great block by him here. Watch him.
That's a tough scoop, and he got it.
Yep. I mean, that's versus Anthony Barr.
Yeah.
That's just a nice job of moving his feet, hand placement, angles. There's just a lot of nice stuff here. And then I love this block by the tight end. I think that's Zach Miller on Everson Griffin. Right there, just a nice job by him.
Terrific. Whitehair had a good scoop backside.
Yep.
On the nose. It's funny because you were talking about Whitehair, and it's funny because you kind of, going into this game and you knew they'd be down Sitten and long, didn't you look at Whitehair as kind of, he can be the stabilizing presence on that interior. And he's like,
you do,
into his career.
Such a testament, to him.
He's so good. He's so good from a cerebral standpoint. That's why he's been able to handle so many different positions. Technically, he's such an impressive. He was a can't miss guy, and he's been excellent.
Yeah, he really was, man. I mean, he was underrated throughout the process
Right.
too. I mean, just the fact that he's doing what he's doing. I mean, I would say that, man, I can't remember the last time somebody's done it, but Mitch Morse did it pretty successfully. But aside from them two, I mean, moving from left tackle to center is, from, last year in college, first year in the pros, that's pretty remarkable.
Right.
So this play right here is a game-winning play for the Raiders in overtime, and it wouldn't have been possible without this block from the right tackle. It was just a really nice job. You're going to see Levante David blitz late. I don't remember if it was late or not, but anyway, Levante David blitzes the B gap. The right tackle works off his man and just picks him up and allows this play to happen, and they win the game. But you most likely would never hear about this, so I thought this would be pretty notable. Yeah. Gives them that clear alley to throw.
Right. Always take care of inside first, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that would have definitely screwed things up
Right.
if you didn't catch him. So yeah, it was just, really good awareness. If you're scouting offensive line, and for me, one of my categories is mental processing, you give them a positive mark right here for sure.
Right. And is that Austin Howard?
I believe so.
I was pretty sure he was still in at that point. This wasn't one of his better games, I didn't think. As I looked through, he got beat for a sack by Noah Spence. He had some things happen, but I think the thing is with Howard is that if you've watched him, is that he's never been perfect. He's been a guy that teams think that you can kind of replace, and he still keeps battling through it to make good plays. He's not a perfect tackle by any means. He's not a premier tackle in the league by any means, but like you said, he's tough and he's mentally aware. He's very tough, very physical, and he's very mentally aware. And because of that, he's going to play for a long time in this league, even if he does leave some things to be desired. But just a quality job by him sticking with it throughout a game in which he wasn't always at his best, but he made a big play when it counted, and this is the result now.
Yeah, Howard's such an interesting guy, just being an undrafted guy out of Northern Iowa. I mean, he's made a good career for himself considering, he's kind of been, this is his fourth team, I believe. He's been on the Eagles, Ravens, Jets, now the Raiders. But, he's been in Howard Mudd's system, in Philly. So he's been exposed to a lot of really good coaching. And he's, like you said, I mean, I think he's just kind of steady in a lot of ways, but he will get beat. He's kind of, he's a serviceable guy.
Right.
This was a very good play.
And on this offensive line, he's clearly probably the weakest player among this group. I mean, but it's such a good group, and so because of that, I think he gets a ton of flack from Raiders Twitter, and some of it's deserved. I get some of it, but on a worse offensive line, he probably wouldn't stand out as much. But because this line's so good, I think his play, gets a little more criticism.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's kind of similar to the dynamic in Dallas with Doug Free.
Yeah.
I mean, he's kind of on an offensive line with great players, and he's just a solid player himself. But for the most part, they're steady guys. But they, especially on TV, people are going to see when offensive linemen get beat, and then
right,
that kind of becomes the story of their career. But yeah, that was in a sense, for an offensive lineman, that's a game-winning play,
right?
So it's pretty cool. So this is really fun. I mean, KO at left guard. I mean, him and Try Turner, in my opinion, are like the nastiest dudes in the league.
Yeah.
On the offensive line in terms of like competitive toughness. I mean, they're going at you every play, and they want to, they make it very clear that they're trying to. I don't want to say hurt you, but definitely dominate you.
Right.
And so this right here is fun because KO right here is going to get engaged with this defensive lineman in front of him in that shaded nose. And they're just going to get, this happens every single game you watch with KO. He's going to get under people's skin. And then watch so the next play, the successive play after it is going to kind of tell the story. But this is nice, though. He does a good job. But yeah, that little after, that defensive tackle knows he's trying to punk him. Right. And he's trying to stand up to him. And this is the very next play. KO.
He thrives on those pancake blocks. That's what gives him energy. But I love how he keeps his feet moving through contact. It's one of the best things about him. There's a lot of big hulking guys that come out in the draft every year. Vada Alexander comes to mind. He's for the Raiders. Actually, he fits a lot of what they do, a lot of what they look for, their prototype and offensive line play. But he was one of those guys to me that he was big and he was hulking. If he lined you up, he could really rock you. But he never kept his feet moving through contact, so he fell off blocks all the time. But the great thing about Osemele and even about Gabe Jackson as big, hulking, mean guys that want to smash you is that they'll keep their feet moving through contact constantly. So, yeah, their grip strength, their power off the ball, but it's their feet that allow them to maintain and finish a lot of those blocks, and that part gets overlooked a little bit in the scouting process sometimes.
Yeah, KO is outstanding at using other people's momentum against themselves.
Right.
And he does that a lot. And he just puts people in compromising positions, and then he's ruthless after the fact, and he'll definitely let you know about it after. But you love to see this. I mean, I just retweeted a play. I don't know if you saw it, that Malik Jackson play with, I think it was either Gabe Jackson or Rodney Hudson, who basically stood up to him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then they finished him the next play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, listening to the Charles Bentley's podcast, it was a few weeks ago. He was talking about him and Wally Williams, who was one of the nastiest dudes back in the day with Charles. They were talking about there's just no offensive lineman. Or no, they said no offensive line unit today who is willing to really send a message. If people are, doing dirty stuff, doing cheap stuff, whatever. And the first thing that came to mind was, I think they're right. But I think if you're going to say one offensive line in the league that really will send a message to, the defense and set the tone and, dictate the game is the Raiders' offensive line, I think.
Right.
I mean, almost everybody on that line is, they're a second away from, kind of sending maybe a over-the-top message. But, man, as a quarterback, as a running back, as a receiver, you love that, because you're protected out there.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to describe the Raiders line for sure.
Yeah, it's just really nice to see. It's kind of a throwback line.
Mm-hmm.
So this play, I actually highlighted this play on Twitter already, but I didn't show the other angle. I mean, this is just another testament to the Cowboys' offensive line and what they're allowing their two rookie offensive stars to do right now, Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, this is a huge play for the Cowboys late in the game to Cole Beasley. I believe this was either the fourth quarter or overtime, if I recall right. And we'll check out Beasley here in the slot first, and then we'll kind of see why this was allowed to happen, which you'll probably see anyway now. But focus on Beasley. This route is sweet. Really nice. He runs like a little skinny post and turns it into a corner.
Mm-hmm.
Man, his quickness is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. He's probably one of the more underrated players in the league, I think. And every time I've watched him, I've thought, man, he should probably get more credit than he does because his route running's so good and his hands are good. He's very tough, very physical. I know he's a small guy, but he really could thrive if Dallas used him a little bit more than they do, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of Cowboy fans probably agree with you, too. I mean, I think he's definitely their best receiver after Dez Bryant.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. No question.
He's a really talented guy. So this is the play just from the end zone angle. You'll see Witten out here. I mean, his effort, I was just mentioning this too. I mean, the tight ends and running back, man, they're an extension of the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
When you have tight ends and running backs who are blocking this well, I mean, it makes life easy on Dak. I mean, nice step up. Again, we mentioned that his pocket presence is good, but without that block from Witten, that critical play in that game is not being made.
Well, even the adjustment on the move. I mean, here you have the defensive end. I think that's Curry spiking inside of you, kind of wrap inside of you, and to adjust on the fly, one hand on the hip, other hand on the shoulder, textbook technique to run them up the arc and past your quarterback and keep your feet moving while changing direction. It's insane. I mean, he doesn't touch Prescott. He can't. And Prescott's calmness is just incredible. I mean, how many quarterbacks in the league would just scramble in this situation? But look at his trust. I mean, he barely just a little shimmy to the side, and as soon as he sees that hand reaching out for the ball, you see that little shift in his weight. He kind of drops the ball down just a little bit to his hip, resets immediately. I mean, that is tons and tons and tons and tons of hours of just working on your feet, and being able to respond to like that in these types of situations. I mean, this is just an extraordinarily subtle play, but that hand is the only thing that's threatening to him because of Witten, and he's able to avoid it that seamlessly. So, yeah, just all around. It's one of the biggest reasons why Prescott's been successful. I talked about it. He made several throws in this game that probably should have lost the game for the Cowboys. The Eagles weren't able to take advantage of, but he is unflappable in the pocket. His presence of mind back there is so good, and he's able to buy time and manipulate the pocket and find an angle to throw from and all those things that you typically don't see from a rookie. He's able to do those at a high level, and because of that, he's creating easier throwing lanes for himself. He's letting receivers continue to work and get open, and so he's able to make more passes. Now, I think there's an argument to be had for Tony Romo being the better pure passer right now, but in terms of what Prescott can do with his athleticism in the pocket, that can't be ignored, I think, when you're evaluating who should be starting for this team, and I think there's cases for both players for sure.
Yeah, I mean, up until this game, I was pretty firm on, Romo should get the job when he comes back. But, dude, I just don't see how you could possibly bench Dak right now. I just don't. I mean, after this win and this performance, this composure, all this that he displayed in this game to get the win, I mean, they've won what, like 6 in a row?
Six in a row now, I think. Yeah, 6 in a row.
Yeah, I just don't see how you bench him. You got to ride this, I think, now at this point. I mean, because you clearly can beat pretty much anybody with him. So, I don't.
What was crazy is that he played, without a doubt, I thought, his worst game so far.
Yeah, he did, and that's what made this so much more impressive. You know?
And yet he still had the composure and the presence of mind to be able to come back and make big throws down the stretch and finish strong. So, yeah, I mean, as long as that level of play showed for most of the game isn't, the habit, but rather kind of those rookie bumps in the road that you're going to hit from time to time against a top-tier defense, it's tough to not start him. It is. He plays at that high level.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you said it best. I mean, his best trait that I've seen is definitely his poise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's incredible, man. That's the type of stuff that, really good veteran guys don't do.
Right.
So, it wasn't a great throw, but
yeah,
I mean, just a great job in the pocket there. And we've highlighted them, I think, 3 times, and every time we mention his pocket presence.
Right.
Just because it's so evident.
Right.
So this was the best game I've ever seen Andrews Pete play. He was a kind of a polarizing guy coming out of Stanford. He played, of course, tackle.
What did you think?
Big dude. I didn't really look at him that closely coming out of Stanford. I just, read people's, especially Duke Manyweather's assessment of him, and saw him a little bit. What really stood out to me was his frame and his just his build. I mean, he is a massive human being. His lower half in particular is he's very, very thick-limbed. And
he's got a donk.
Yeah, he's really interesting, and I like him at guard, man. I mean, he's especially on this offensive line, in between Unger, who's one of the smartest guys in the league, and then, you have one of the premier left tackles in the league, if he could stay healthy, is Armstead. So he's in a good spot that way. They make him look good. They cover up a lot of his mistakes, but this game in particular was the best game I've ever seen him play. I mean, he looked great in pass protection for the most part. He was hitting his spots and, not oversetting guys like he tends to do. So I think he found a home at left guard. And, the Saints love their offensive line, especially the interior in particular, to be real stout and strong up front. So he really fits that mold perfectly. But we're going to highlight 2 plays. This is just one of his nicer blocks in the game that I wanted people to see. I mean, just this angle and the athleticism to get to the second level, and watch his hand placement with his outside hand, and then just you'll see his power. We'll start it over. I mean, that was a really nice. That's KJ Wright, probably some of the best range in the league at linebacker. He just takes that little movement right there with his inside hand, almost knocks KJ Wright over, but it forces him to just lose his balance.
Yeah, it just shoves him right past the gap there.
Right. It was just really good range right there for him at the second level. And that stood out. And then, I figured I had to throw this one in there. I wanted to tweet this one out, but this is fun. Watch him at left guard and watch him. He's gonna, unfortunately, 33.
I saw this play. Yeah. I saw this play. This is great. I mean, Kelsey McRae, I believe, is that safety playing in the box for Seattle in place of Cam Chancellor while Chancellor's injured.
He wasn't expecting all that.
No, he squared it up. Like, no, you gotta try to win with your speed. You're not gonna square up on your speed and be successful. So, good luck with that one.
Yeah, that was a welcome to the NFL moment right there for sure.
Oh boy.
So I mean, you just get a little taste of what he did, but he was really good in pass protection too, and that was probably the more impressive part because that's where he really struggled. So
yeah,
it was just a really impressive game by him for sure.
Yeah, and even without Bennett, if you can be good in pass protection against some of the guys, I mean, Seattle will put Frank Clark inside. They'll put they have a ton of pass rushers. They'll move guys around, and Averill was even inside a couple reps in that game I saw, and so they do a lot of different things with their front. So if you can pass protect at a high level against Seattle, even without Michael Bennett, you're doing pretty well for yourself. And that's encouraging to hear you say it. I hadn't watched Pete a whole lot. I know he struggled to tackle, and there was some criticism of him in preseason at guard. But to me, it was always can you teach him to play the position? I didn't care about how well or poorly he did early on because you're making that kind of a transition, and if that's going to be a full-time thing, that's going to take time for a lot of guys. So I never really saw with him a tackle, but I'm with you. I thought, skill-wise, I think he makes a lot of sense at guard. He had a little bit heavy feet, I always thought, coming out, which can get you killed on the edge, I think, in a little more space. So maybe inside that'll be where he becomes really successful. He's always had that physicality. I think his nastiness kind of was hit or miss from time to time at some, but it's definitely not a matter of power or the desire to be physical. There's no doubt about that.
Right, and I think it's just in terms of pass protection especially, but even in the run game. I mean, the angles which you play in and the angles that you take, and really hand placement. Right. If your base is strong, and just knowing how to use them independently. And so those little things he's starting to get. And, like you mentioned, his base, his sort of foundation of traits, I think is strong enough to really lend itself to probably a very good player one day.
Right. And I'll be curious to see how they develop him because that left side plus Unger in the middle, can be a really solid side of the offensive line. Now, I think it's Jari Evans' backside or right side and Zach Streif. They're getting a little bit older, but they've played in New Orleans for forever. And just part of the struggle, knowing in terms of knowing what Sean Payton wants and knowing what Drew Brees does in the pocket is huge assets for them. So I think it's a big reason why the Saints have been so successful this year offensively is because of the play of that offensive line up front and the continuity that's kind of being established there, which is huge for Drew Brees because it's allowed him to be quietly one of the best players in the league this year. I don't know how you can be quietly one of the best players if you're Drew Brees, but that's what's happening because he's been awesome.
Crazy. New Orleans, man. I mean, it's sad what happened to them on defense, because offense, man, they have so much talent. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's nuts. And, their defense is patchwork right now. We were just talking about that on Breaking the Plane. But, I think they have down like 7 defensive starters from what you thought their unit would be at the beginning of the year. So, and a couple depth guys too. So tough to be successful in that. In the NFL, and they play tough every week. They're going to be in every game all year, whether they're a playoff contender or not. They're going to be in every game just because they're that
They're
explosive
going to be
offensive.
dangerous at home.
Right.
You know, I mean, as always. I mean,
Right.
it's funny. They're kind of just like a Big 12 team.
Right. Yep.
It's funny.
That is
That's
how it
what
is.
it's like when you play with them. It's just a shootout.
Win those shootouts, yeah, for sure. So this was fun. Good Under the Microscope video edition stuff. Let us know what you guys thought of this one. You know, we kind of mixed it up and looked at a little bit of everything. It's fun highlighting a team. We've gotten to the point now where we've highlighted a good number of teams in the league, and if those teams are successful each week, we can go back and highlight them a second time, but we like to vary it up and look at different offensive lines. We may look at some things outside offensive lines, or we may look at some offensive line play that was particularly subpar, which we probably could have done with Minnesota Vikings this past week. I was wondering if you'd have any TJ Clemmings teaching moments in here, but
I mean, we could do the Vikings and Seahawks every week, you know.
Jeez, man. Those groups need some help. But yeah, so we might do some different things with this. Let us know what you guys think when you watch this, when you check it out. If you like the kind of smorgasbord idea, we may do that from time to time. And, you know, I finished up coaching now, so we may have a little more time if we ever try to get 2 in a week, and we'll see how that goes as the season progresses. Maybe for playoffs, we'll try and get one on a couple of the playoff teams in games if there's anything noteworthy. But anyway, always fun talking to you guys on Under the Microscope. We really appreciate you guys checking it out, and we'll be back again soon with more good stuff on the Under the Microscope video editions.